Alright, this is part 12, and in the last part, the last couple of pages were like a lot of like mysticism and whatnot. I couldn't really understand it all too much, other than the idea that like basically idolatry and corruption are kind of one and the same thing. Essentially, it's just kind of like taking the original knowledge and kind of like perverting it, making it not how it was originally intended. So that's kind of the gist of what I got from the last part. And so we'll continue on this paragraph. I believe we started here. So the most remarkable feature in the heathen theology is the multiplicity of its gods. And so this is like referring to polytheism. So there was like a division, and it started with Moses, basically, where it's like monotheism and then like polytheism. And then also we see that with Akhenaten, monotheism. And one thing I do want to point out between polytheism and monotheism is that you can have aspects of monotheism within polytheism, meaning that like these polytheists, right, they would point to one of their gods as like the chief god and like revere that specifically. But then it's like they also recognize that there's also other gods that are in other areas or like not their god, so to speak. I think that's the easiest way to put it. Monotheism exclusively seems to be the fact or the idea that there's only one god to have existed, and anything else was not a god but a demon rather, or some sort of explanation. I really don't understand how they try to play it off or explain it. But yeah, anything that's not the monotheistic god is basically like a demon or of the devil. And we only kind of get that dichotomy of like God and the demon in Western philosophy. I think in Eastern it's really like more polytheistic, and then there's so many revered heroes and gods and whatnot in Eastern, as far as like I said, as far as I understand Eastern philosophy, as opposed to Western philosophy and Western philosophy's evolution, that being monotheism or polytheism into monotheism. So yeah, that's what I'm extracting from this sentence here. So let's keep continuing. The easy temper of polytheism, as it has been called, hesitated not to adopt the divinities of the surrounding nations, while the deification not only of heroes and kings, but of the virtues and vices, with the Geni of the woods and waters, mountains and cities, contributed to introduce new and strange inmates into the pantheon. So I think they're saying like, oh, how there's a god of like mountains, and then there's a god of water, there's a god of storms, there's a god of wood, there's a god of skyscrapers. I think that's kind of what they're saying. But if we reject these modern intruders, if we restore to their original seats the imported deities such as Pan to Arcadia, Hermes to Egypt, Osiris to Memphis, Hercules to Tyre, and Dionysus to India. Wait, what the heck? What does that mean? Isn't Dionysus like a Greek pantheon? Why is it saying India? Oh, let me look this up. Pretty sure Dionysus is like a Greek pantheon. Let's just look up who's Dionysus. Right? I'm just getting something mixed up in my head. Yeah, look, ancient Greek god of wine, fertility, ritual madness, religious ecstasy, and theater. So he's like a drinking god. He's the son of Zeus and the mortal. So I don't know what this really means, but anyways, he's a Greek god. And why is it revering it to India? Oh man, this is something to unfold here. I don't know what they're trying to point here. again, this is one of those things where they just kind of like put something on the table, and then they just kind of make it just like, okay, what does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, and like, oh yeah, you know, we keep reading, but I don't know. Like Osiris to Memphis makes sense. Pan to Arcadia, those are kind of words I don't really use. I forget where Arcadia is. I'd have to double check that. Pan is like a Greek god? I don't know, dude. Hermes to Egypt. I think they associate Hermes and Thoth. I think Manly P. Hall has pointed that out. That Hermes and Thoth, they're both like gods of knowledge. And to associate it with Egypt is, I guess, correct. But Hercules to Tyre, huh? What is that about? Well, Tyre is known for like their stone walls and their island being impenetrable. Interestingly enough. And then there's also the Pillars of Hercules, but that's over in Spain. And that would be on the other side of the Mediterranean. You know, we have all these like old names associated with these places, but we really just don't even... We kind of just quick Google search like the whole meaning behind it, and then just kind of like click off from it. But, you know, to really dig into like where these things come from and what they're actually saying and what they're like, kind of like, I guess, iconographing or symbolizing. It takes like a lot of like foreknowledge going into that, you know, because most people just kind of like Google search it and then they get a quick answer, and then they're just kind of like satisfied by that, which for the most part I guess is okay. Like if you just want to say like I don't know, where did Odysseus go in the Odyssey? You know what I mean? Then that's kind of like something you don't really need to, as far as I would understand. Like, well, actually, maybe, you know, maybe what if he went to the Americas and it was explained that he went to the Americas, but we just didn't look at it, you know? I don't know. I guess it's kind of contradicting myself there, I guess. But yeah, after reading that just kind of threw me off. Dionysus to India, huh? And if we investigate the origin of each, we shall find every nation, notwithstanding the variety of names, acknowledging the same deities and the same system of theology. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. You know, it's like there's like a storm god in Mexico, right? So you have like Quetzalcoatl, right? It's a god of like rainstorms and stuff and whatnot. And then you have like Teshub and Lil and like all this like storm god stuff, like the exact same parallel over in Mesopotamia. And then obviously Zeus. And then in India, I forget who. I'm pretty sure there's like a oh man, I had just talked to this about somebody. There's like a storm god in Japan too. Has like drums that kind of like encircle it. I forgot that person's name. Again, god of storms and lightning, rainstorms most specifically. Just kind of like a weather god, I guess. More, I guess, explicit depictions of it, I guess, would be maybe like riding a bull or something. I don't really know, but that's at least over in like Mesopotamia and whatnot. I don't know if Zeus rides a bull. I'm pretty sure he does. And if so, it's like, okay, come on, that's like an obvious depiction. You know what I mean? Like I don't know how to make it more obvious at that point. So, and however humble any of the deities may appear in the pantheons of Greece and Rome, each who has any claim to antiquity will be found ultimately, if not immediately, resolvable into the original god or goddess, into one or other of the two primeval principles. In conducting such an investigation, a very singular circumstance presents itself in the manifold character of these deities. Their human or terrestrial appearance. Terrestrial? They were using that in the 1800s? Fascinating. Alright, I'll take it. What the hell? That must have like an older meaning then. As the sun, moon, elements, and powers of nature, they assume a celestial or physical aspect. Yeah, I mean, yeah, just kind of like, okay, so like, it's kind of like, when they see like, like you're like a, let's say you're like an ancient Mexican, right? Like you're an old Aztec Mexican, right? And one morning, it starts to rain and shit like that. Or excuse me. Sorry for my foul language. I was just kind of dozing off right there. You're just kind of like, I guess, yeah, just dozing off in the morning. You wake up as like an ancient Mexican, Aztec warrior, whatever you want to call it, and you see like a storm, right? Then you're obviously gonna associate that with like Quetzalcoatl or whoever, Votan, whoever they associated that with. I think Kukulkan is another word for it. Is that the right region? Pretty sure it's the same thing. It's like a thunderstorm of some sort, right? So they associated that with that, and I think that's what this is saying, is they assume a celestial or physical aspect. And if we turn to the writings of the philosophers, we shall find them sustaining a character more abstract and metaphysical. Yet under all these different forms, the same general system is preserved. In his terrestrial character, the chief hero god, under whatever name, is claimed by every nation as its progenitor and founder. And not only is he celebrated as the king of that country in particular, but of the whole world, he is exposed to some alarming danger from the sea, or an evil principle or monster by which the sea is represented. So yeah, it's like a mortal hero, and then he fights like a great beast, and that great beast is usually said to like come from the sea. I think that's the he's definitely referencing the old Babylonian text. I think it's it's the one with Tiamat. So Tiamat's like the primeval water, and then like I think it's said that like Marduk fights Tiamat, and this is all some sort of like celestial aspect that what he's saying, like what Cory's saying, and then but okay, so now looking at the terrestrial part, is this true? Like, is this okay? So you're saying like, so the academics will specifically point out the celestial aspect of it, right? That's like a given. So they're only going to see this as like a celestial. So here, Cory's saying is like, in his terrestrial character, the chief hero god is claimed by every nation as its progenitor and founder. So that's like saying like for instance Marduk, right? So he's represented as I think I don't even know. I don't know what planet they associate with that. Well, let me ask ChatGPT, because what Zachariah Sitchin says is that Marduk is associated with like literally a 12th planet. Like that's the whole idea of like that is like a planet came close to the Earth and kind of changed things around and either broke it apart or did something. That's one cataclysm, and that would be like a very ancient cataclysm. I wouldn't associate that with like Noah's flood. That was like a very, very ancient past thing. That's like if you were to assume there was like something that created the solar system, like that could have been an explanation on how they would have done it. Possibly. I don't know. I'm just using gravitational forces. If that's what they're implying, if that's both what like the ancient Babylonians were implying when they wrote like Marduk slaying Tiamat, right, as like associating like the planet Marduk like coming close to the old Earth, right, and then like causing some sort of gravitational effect and creating like a split, like a excuse me, like a destruction of some sort. But yeah, let me ask ChatGPT. So, what planet is Marduk associated with in the? And I'm pretty sure it's the Enuma Elish. Okay. Marduk is associated with Jupiter. The text describes how Marduk, after defeating Tiamat and creating the cosmos, assigns celestial bodies to their places and establishes the orders. So, ancient Babylonian traditions explicitly link Marduk with the planet Jupiter, Sagmegar, and cuneiform. I think Sagmegar is Sagmegar Sumerian? Because I know for a fact that the Akkadians have some of their text using loan words from Sumerian. That's actually a fact. That's why I say that the glyphs of Sumerian and Akkadian are the same thing, because they're taking loan words. It's honestly like Japanese. I don't know if I explained this in a previous video. Okay, so GPT is saying, yes, Sagmegar is written in Sumerian logograms, but in this context it represents a word used in Akkadian. It corresponds to... I don't know if I'll get flagged for saying this word, but Nibiru, which refers to the planet Jupiter in Babylonian astronomical texts, according to academics. So the breakdown of Sagmegar, so Sumerian doesn't use the root words like in Hebrew or in Akkadian. When you put words together in Sumerian, they're completely different. They're like completely different words. They have none of the words act as like a prefix or suffix to the root word. None of it. Doesn't do any sort of like conjugation. So like when you do a conjugation in Akkadian, it's very similar to Spanish conjugations, if you understand Spanish. English, you don't really conjugate too much. You just say like, you say like a past tense, and then you just add like an S to a lot of like plural forms, which is not really much of a conjugation. Or, I think I think it's like in reverse of what I said, with the adding the S to the end. But so it says Sagmegar. So Sag means chief. So I think like anyways, meh, so Sagmegar, so meh is office or order, or like some sort of like kind of principle, I don't know, maybe, yeah, I'd say order. And then gar, it's a verb and it means to place or to establish. So the chief of order establishes, or the established ruler is what it says. The chief, yeah, okay, alright. So that's Jupiter, but it's Nibiru. But they say Nibiru refers to planet Jupiter. I'll have to double check that, because I haven't read the Enuma Elish. So far I've only translated the Atrahasis, but keep in mind I'm pretty young, so you can't blame me. I just found this stuff out not too long ago, so... yeah. Well, I knew of like a lot of like biblical stuff as a kid. But I kind of like didn't see it in that perspective. I kind of saw things in a more academic and too logical of a perspective. And when I say logical, I mean like there's some sort of like no form of like intelligent manipulation or intervention, right? So no like divine, you could say either intelligent or divine intervention with the process of humanity and evolution itself. I used to think that purely, mostly because I went to school and I studied a lot of science, and I still study science today, but now I'm seeing how much of this, like, stuff that's not looked at has a lot of, like, merit to it, simply because of the fact that ancient ruins exist and we can't date them. And the dating seems to be like a point of contingency with all these, like, schools and, like, what are they called? Those antiquities, those freaking departments. I don't know what they're called. Those shoot, what are they called? There's like historians for the country, and they kind of like regulate the. I mean, essentially, they're kind of regulating tourism, but in an ideal sort of sense, like they're representing the country, and like, it's like, I don't know, knowledge, collective knowledge. But dude, I go on way too many tangents in this book. This book is just, there's so much to like kind of talk about. So, yeah, that was really interesting, honestly. Just kind of leading me from like Sumerian to like the cosmological differences, then thinking about like how stuff has changed in our schools and stuff like that. It just makes you, it's so crazy to just pull these books out from the 1800s, right? Because our narrative is so different than today. Pull this book out and just kind of like, just be like, holy crap, just a completely different mindset, that these people have the intention when they're writing. Completely different, they're not, things are pretty crazy now. He is nevertheless, why do I just right-clicked, my bad. He is nevertheless rescued by some friendly female aid, sometimes concealed in a cavern or in the moon, or preserved in a death-like sleep, borne upon a snake, or floating on an island or lotus, though much more frequently in a boat or ark. So it's like, hold on, let me back this up here. He is nevertheless rescued by some female-friendly aid, sometimes concealed in a cavern or in the moon. Okay, so when it's saying sometimes concealed, I think he's saying the male hero, or preserved in a death-like sleep, borne upon a snake, or floating on an island or lotus, or more in a boat or ark. Okay, well, those are interesting thoughts to ponder upon. This first one, this death-like sleep, kind of reminds me of like the Legend of Zelda, where he's like sleeping and then he wakes up and it's all this chaos going on. Kind of funny. I wonder if they really based it on something like that. I'm not sure where this cavern or moon or death-like sleep. I hope he breaks it down a lot more in this book. So at length he awakens from his slumber, subdues his enemy, and lands upon a mountain. He then reorganizes the world and becomes himself the father, primarily of 3 sons, and through them of the human race, not unfrequently with some allusions to the dove and rainbow. In fact, in his human character, he was the great father of mankind, but he may not only be identified with Noah but with Adam likewise. The one was looked upon as a reappearance of the other, and both an incarnation of the deity. In his immediate celestial character, the god is universally held to be the sun, but the character of the great goddess is more of a complex description. Okay, so I see what's kind of being said here. So apart from this kind of like I guess, allegory to like Judeo-Christian stuff. I kind of want to look at this in his immediate celestial character. The god is universally held to be the sun. So we have like a lot of sun gods, especially in like South America and stuff like that. And it's interesting to note, like, if, let me see, like, is Quetzalcoatl a storm, rain god, or a sun god? Well, then who's the... Okay, so it's not saying Quetzalcoatl is a storm or rain god. He's just a god of wisdom and creation and wind. So then who's the... That role... Okay, so that role belongs to Talak. I think that's in the Popol Vuh. I'll have to double check my sources on the Popol Vuh. The Aztec sun god... Okay, so the rain god is Tlaloc. The Aztec sun god is Tonatio. Tonatio. Though some myths mention a solar connection in early traditions. Yeah, okay. So it's, I'm looking as like a parallel of Quetzalcoatl then being like obviously Thoth, and like what Hermes is like this Tonatiuh. And then Zeus is like a... But see, like, these are just, like, kind of, like... I think there's one, like, historian who wrote that, don't get sucked into, like, parallelomania. Where, like, kind of don't fall into it. Because, I mean, the stories... I mean, these are, like, connected in this sort of sense. Well, maybe not connected, but I think what I mean to say is, like, there's obviously that parallel there, right? You obviously have, like, a sun god here, you have a sun god there, and whatnot. But I think the stories for them are probably a little bit different, so putting them together, I don't know, I'll just have to dive into it one day with another book and kind of go back to this one and compare. But I'm gonna try to finish this last, okay. I'm trying to finish this, wrap this up, and then end the video, because it's getting pretty long. As the companion of the man, she is the ark, which was regarded not only as his consort, but his daughter, as the work of his own hands, and his mother, from whose womb again emerged as an infant to a second life, and his preserver, the catastrophe of the deluge. Okay, so that's kind of like some Sumerian Babylonian stuff that they talk about. I kind of know what he's talking about. Zachariah Sitchin points that out with, like, Enki, like, sleeping with his sister, and then has a kid, and then sleeps with the daughter, so... just that whole... There's that story, but continuing on. As the companion of the sun, she is either the earth or moon. Not that the distinctions between the human and celestial characters are accurately maintained, for they are so strangely blended together that the adventures applicable to one are frequently and sometimes purposely misapplied to the other. So this is what I was kind of saying earlier. It's just like, they have like a storm god, right, in Mexico, just like they do in Mesopotamia. But it's like the story and journey that they have is probably more than likely different. And he's, like Cory's saying here, it's, sometimes it could be intentionally misapplied like that. You know what I mean? And that it is actually referring to the same one, but maybe I'm not there yet, so I'm gonna keep this, I'll keep this book in my pocket, and just kind of like hold up to what Cory's saying, because this is, like I said before, I found this book kind of by accident. I was just kind of looking for, like, ancient books and stuff like that, and then I came across this book, because I was on, like, archive.org, and I looked up, like, ancient books, and then I ran into this book and I was like, what? And then I think Helena Blavatsky has actually quoted Cory with this book. That's also something that's like really, really interesting. Is like this book has some merit, you know. It's like I'm not sure who else is also referred to that this book has. So I mean, it's kind of like George Smith's book with like Assyriology and stuff like that. It's like a reference book to something. Yeah, so thus while man is said to have entered to and been concealed in and have again issued from the ark, the moon and the earth indifferently, the sun is fabled to have been plunged into the ocean, to have sailed upon a lotus and to have taken refuge in a floating island, and to have dwelt upon a sacred mountain left dry by the retiring flood. Oh, that's an interesting sentence. I think I'll end it here. I really want to read more, but I went off on too many tangents. But I think those are good tangents because that really opened up a lot of stuff I didn't really look up or really know. I'm trying to be a little bit more quick with my chat GPT because I am kind of slow with it sometimes. But I think this was a really interesting one, honestly, because this one went into more of it was less ambiguous than the other video, because the other video was just like a bunch of, I don't know, sacred geometry, math stuff, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I mean, geometry is really useful, but I really don't know what they're saying with that type of stuff. It's too like mystical. I need something like at least somewhat tangible. You know, like this all makes sense. It's like revering people as like, or revering past people as like celestial things in the air. I don't really know, man. It makes a lot more sense, you know. I guess that's like a way of keeping information or knowledge, is just like kind of recognizing something as someone. And it was like I was saying earlier, like imagining yourself as like an ancient like Aztec Mexican in the sky, and you see a storm and you're like, oh, I guess I was wrong with Quetzalcoatl, and you'd say, oh, it's Taluk, you know what I mean? That's how like the information would get passed. You know, or just keeping the words within the language itself. You know? You know, one thing actually too, one more thing before I end the video. Is the word, I'm seeing the word like Rabima and Rabbi in Akkadian, right? So that means great. And that means like great or like greater or like, I don't know, maybe not elder, but great. It means like a great. It's kind of the word like magna. When you'd say like Magna Graecia, you'd say like Greater Greece, right? You'd say like Rabima or Rabimu. It's some form of that. That reminds me of the word rabbi that's used in Hebrew. You know, so it's kind of like paying close attention to words and how they're pronounced and how they're possibly taken from another language based on like the way you say it and how that knowledge just kind of gets passed along. And it gets passed along because it's like the thing I was saying where, you know, it's kind of like you recognize it so much, and if you kind of like joke around a lot, you kind of do make jokes and references of like saying someone's a people, or you know, you'll make a joke about someone. It's like, oh, you pulled this person, you know, and then you'll always have that, and then eventually you'll just say their name and just be like, oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Kind of like an inside joke, but it's like the inside joke is what preserved the knowledge. So make sure to have some inside jokes.